Beautiful love.
So just across there we've got the Ocean Studios. That's been open a few years now, and that's who we've got in here. We've got a new studio by the looks of it. Hello.
Oh, hi.
What's your name?
I'm Beth Munro, and this is my open studios, which I'm doing until Sunday.
And how long have you been here for?
I've been here for about 3 years, but this is a shared space, so
Nice.
I share it with lots of other artists in this area, so I come in 1 day a week and use it.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and I have my own studio where I live in Cornwall, and as well. And but I work here. I sometimes do workshops, and I'm just part of this artist community in Ocean Studios.
And whereabouts are you based in Cornwall?
I'm based in Downderry. I
Right.
have a studio which was my living room and is now my studio. So,
Right, okay.
yeah,
So how
yeah.
did you get into art?
Oh, so I did an art degree in the late 80s, and but I ended up being an environmental sculptor.
Yeah.
At the time there was a recession and I wasn't able to find work, so I ended up becoming a garden designer.
That's nice.
And did that for 25 years, and then about 10 years ago I just decided I wanted to be more creative, so
Yeah.
I decided I'd go back to night school and look at different types of art and decide which one I wanted to do. So I ended up doing an evening course at the Plymouth College of Art in printmaking, and I did that for a year and loved it. And then from there I went to a lovely lady called Mary Gillett, who's a traditional etcher, and she lives in Tavistock, and I started doing classes with her, and I still do classes with her 9 years later on a Friday morning, and she's fantastic. And I fell in love with etching and all forms of printmaking, so I've been doing that ever since.
Printmaking seems to be picking up again, doesn't it? It's very popular in Plymouth.
I think a lot of crafts and arts are starting to evolve and develop in a new way, because I mean COVID has meant that lots of people have been doing it from their bedroom. They've gone online, they've found tutorials, they've taught themselves how to do quite a lot of these things. There's lots of online teaching in lockdown, and I think people just love it. I think that people are just embracing being creative again. And you're right, there's a lot of printmakers.
It's making them value life a lot more.
Yeah, I think so. I just think there's a lot more creativity in people, and they, you know, in lockdown they had the time to explore that, and that's been great. So I've been here all week. I had lots of people coming in who are just interested in the whole process, who have sort of dipped their toe, but not quite sort of feeling confident to do it. So, you know, I'm sure that a lot of those people will then go and explore evening classes and, workshops, and, maybe we'll have even more printmakers.
So what influences you in your art?
I'm influenced by the sea. I live by the sea, and I was brought up by the sea as a child, rock pooling, swimming, walking, coastal walking, skier. And we moved down to Cornwall 20 years ago because we wanted our children to have a different kind of life. Yeah. And I wanted them to guddle around in the rock pools and walk to school up by the beach, and just be connected to the natural world. I walk my dog every day, and in lockdown I walked my dog every day and picked up lots of plastic and stuff on the beach, all the debris every day that comes in on the shore, on the tide. And I started collecting it and thinking, right, I want to do something with this. This is important, and I feel like I'm becoming much more environmentally aware, and started doing a lot of reading about some of the stuff that's happening in the oceans and the amount of plastic and microplastics and stuff like that. So I thought I'm going to explore some of that stuff. So my work is a lot about just looking at our relationship with the natural world.
And what are your materials? What materials do you use for sculpting?
For sculpt, I don't really, not so much sculpting now goes on. I collect all these items and I put them into frames. Not really sculpting, it's mainly printmaking that I'm doing and relief work. So, but maybe I'll do some more. I want to do some ceramics around some of this stuff. And actually printmaking and ceramics are really quite well connected because they're both very process driven.
Yeah.
So I would like to make some lino cuts and then press them into tiles and do something that's a bit more sort of like a fresco or something quite big.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of dabbling a little bit into ceramics, but
can you show us some of your work?
Yeah, I can. What would you like to see?
Whatever you like. Really.
Show you what an etching is?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. So if you come over here, I can show you my etchings. So these are all along here are etchings, and they are basically a form of intaglio. They are basically pieces of art that are made using metal plates and acid. So here is one of my plates. So this is a finished plate, which I have basically drawn into the plate and then dipped in acid. I can explain this is everything that's on this plate is in my final image, and the image is here. This one's the final image.
Right, okay.
So everything that's on this plate is in this image.
It's almost like a Victorian glass.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, in Victorian times, well, number one, etching is really old. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, so it kind of felt quite appropriate with this piece to use etching. Secondly, in Victorian times, you used to see these glass domes, and inside the glass domes would be beautiful things from the natural world, because the Victorians celebrated the natural world in a way that we probably don't understand anymore. They were at the forefront of exploring the globe and plant collecting and all these new things that were arriving in the new science. So that was celebrated, and often they would do this and show this using these glass domes or jars. And so I thought, right, I want to do something around that, but what I want to put inside that jar is the reality of where we're at right now, which is me walking on the beach. They're all things I found on one particular day in March last year, and I wanted to do illustration of those because that sort of was showing us, what we celebrate now isn't necessarily nature, it's the sort of byproduct of our existence on the planet and the impact that we make. Anyway, so back to the plate. This plate, so this plate, I started off blank plate, nice and shiny, degrease it, and then I put something called a hard ground on it. Yeah. And a hard ground is a kind of wax that you melt onto the warmed plate, and you then use a roller and create a skin all over the plate. So it's a very, very thin skin, a bit like cling film. Yeah. And then you let that cool, and then you're going to draw into that skin using this tool. This is like a little needle. You're not scratching the plate, you're literally just drawing into the wax. As you draw into the wax, what you're doing is you're displacing the wax, so you're exposing the metal.
Right, okay.
And then you do your drawing. Because mine is incredibly fine, I then have to dip it in vinegar for 10 minutes to get all the tiny, tiny bits of wax off the little lines that I've drawn. Then dry that, rinse it, dry it, and then it goes in the acid. And when you dip it in acid, what happens is that the acid only eats away at the line that you've exposed. Right. So you bite it. And biting is basically where the acid bites down into the exposed line, and it creates like a well. That's what the ink sits in, is in this well. And you can kind of control the depth of colour or the intensity of the line by how long you put it in the acid for. So if you want a very fine line, then you would only have it in the acid for 2 or 3 minutes. If you want a deeper colour line, you'd probably have it in for a bit longer, so that the well is deeper, there's more ink in that well, and that translates to a darker line.
Right.
So that is one process that you can do with etching. There's lots and lots of processes, and the one important one, other than the line, is what's called an aquatint. And an aquatint is your tonal value. So it's where you go from light to dark.
Yes.
And you use that using something called a resin, pine resin dust. And that is, you have an aquatint box, and the aquatint box has lots of dust in it. It has a little paddle wheel, and you close the box, you turn the paddle wheel, and all the dust is distributed in the box. And then you slide your plate into that box, and the dust settles onto the plate, creating a creamy surface. You leave it in for 8, 10 or 12 minutes, depending on what type of aquatint you want. Pull it out. And then you take it to another place where you heat it from underneath using a flame, and what that does is it melts the pine resin and fuses it onto the plate, and it's like lots of little mountains all stuck together, lots of little pimples, lots of pixels. It's all over the plate, and it's all shiny and sparkly. That's then ready to dip into the acid. And so what you're going to do, the first thing you do is you're going to look at your plate and say, what do I want to be white in the final image? And everything you want to be white, you're going to block out using a block out varnish, which you put on with a paintbrush. And then you're going to dip it in the acid for like 3 seconds. And at 3 seconds, you're going to get a slight off-white colour. And then you take it out of the acid, you wash it, you dry it, then you get your stop out varnish and you do the same thing again. Then you dip it for another, say, 3 seconds or 5 seconds, and that gives you your next grade of colour, so like a less white sort of bit. And you keep going until you go from all the way from white to dark black. Okay, so that can take quite a long time. So some of my etchings, the darkest point is probably about 10 minutes.
And how long did it take you to learn the skill?
Well, I've been doing it for years, and I would say that probably to get my head around some of the processes a good 2 years.
Yeah.
And then every time you're doing a plate, you're exploring different things, you come across different issues, you want to have different effects, so you're always stretching yourself, looking for other ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And then I think the hardest bit is like getting used to understanding all the variables that go on for each plate you do, like the acid bath. One day can be busy, one day it can be slow. It's all to do with the temperature or how many plates have been in it the day before. So you've got to be really aware of what is happening at that very moment.
Yeah.
So you've got to be good at looking and got to be good at making the decision.
So
right.
It's quite erratic.
Yeah, and then you have to go, right, I'm going to take it out now, and this is it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you overdo it, sometimes you underdo it, sometimes it fails completely,
That's
and then you just have to start. It is.
When things aren't over, it's kind of Andy Warhol's like that.
Yeah, and the best thing is when you've done your plate and you ink it up for the first time, and it's really exciting because you haven't really seen the finished thing on a piece of paper, and it's just inking that plate up and putting it on the press, putting your paper over it, roll it through, and then like peeking and pulling it up and seeing what you've made is the best bit, especially if it looks good.
Yeah, I was just looking at that piece there. It looks like a lung.
Yeah, that's Seaweed Lung. So it's actually lino cut, that one.
Yeah.
So I was pressing seaweed. Another thing I was doing, so I was collecting seaweed that had come up on the shoreline, and then I would soak it and dry it and press it, and I had this lovely I think it's called dulce seaweed, and it's red, and I pressed it and I thought, oh, it really looks like a lung.
Well,
so
actually,
I thought,
doesn't it heavily oxygenates the planet anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It absorbs CO2.
Yeah.
And they're sort of doing a lot of research around that now, which is really good for the oceans, because it means kelp forests, particularly, they absorb a huge amount, and so does seagrass.
I learnt, I was watching television the other night, and it was interesting because they said by building dams, you upset the balance of the earth, and so the earth is tilted off angle slightly because of the dams that have been built.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, in a way, I can understand. I think any interruption or any change that we make must have an impact on something else.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like
too powerful and too big, really, haven't we?
or we don't really think about the little tiny changes that occur. So there was one quite interesting thing I read. There's a lovely book that's just come out called Rock Pooling by a local lady.
Yeah.
And she was talking about limpets, and there was an oil spillage somewhere, I think Milford Haven or somewhere like that, and apparently a lot of the limpets were died because of the result of that. And the immediate impact on lack of limpets was that all the rock pools around this whole area grew this green algae.
Yeah.
Like so much so that you couldn't walk on it. They were really slippy, slimy, and everything. And it made you realise that's what the limpet's job was to basically eat all this algae, and that's what they do.
Everything's interconnected, or
and everything's interconnected. And so if you lose one thing, if you lose one species out of the chain, then it really impacts on both sides. But of the food chain particularly, or the biodiverse habitat chain. And I think we're just learning more and more and more.
Also, everything's so fragile as well because it's so interlinked. If the domino effect, which is what I was talking about yesterday, if you affect one thing, then it dominoes into the other things as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, there's a big project going on in Plymouth at the moment to the seagrass project, which is in Plymouth Sound.
Yeah.
So we've lost 80% of the seagrass in this area, which is really, really important for not only for absorbing CO2, it's also really important for all the species that rely on it, like spiny seahorses, for instance. So they've nearly disappeared, and it's partly because of this. But one of the reasons we've lost it is it's partly through trawler fishing. It's partly because of moorings, so boats anchoring and having moorings, and they drag the chain around the seabed, and it kills all the seagrass. And there's these aerial views of all these like enormous bare circles around all of the moorings and the anchors.
They're working on a new anchor system.
They are, and it's something that's happening at Plymouth University, working with this seagrass project. But it's really good because we understand now what's going on. We understand what our impact is, and we can reverse it.
In some areas, because they're also on about making Plymouth the home of the Trident missiles and the home of the nuclear submarine fleet. So on one hand, they're saying they're trying to save the planet, and then on the other hand, they're on about putting more radiation into the Tamar.
It's it's a difficult one, that, isn't it? Because I suppose, I find it slightly weird that we live in this city, and in the middle of the city are all these nuclear submarines that have been, haven't been used for years and years and years, but they are here. But I guess
they haven't been used because they're there for the radiation levels to decompose enough, so they'll be there for 102 years, basically. Anyway, we're not going to the politics.
No, let's not do that.
Anyway.
I'll get into trouble if I start talking politics.
Okay. It's really nice to see your work anyway. How can people contact you?
Well, I've got a website, bethmunro.printmakers, which is you can go and visit, and on Instagram, bethmunro.prints.
Facebook.
And Munro is Munro. And I think that's about it. That's how you can get me.
Okay, thanks very much for your
time. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
Fiddles, borrows, guitar, flute, we will play together, standing in the cold stone streets in the winter weather. This is